All right, let's jump right in. We are about to unpack one of the most controversial, just fascinating stories in the entire Quran. It's a tale about an ancient king, a mysterious wall, and yes, hordes of monsters just waiting for the end of the world. It's a story that has been debated for centuries and, as you're about to see, has led to some truly wild modern theories. So let's start with the big question, the one that sits right at the heart of this whole mystery. Who was this legendary figure? This person who supposedly journeyed to the ends of the earth and built a massive wall to contain an apocalyptic threat? Well, the answer is tucked away in the 18th chapter of the Quran. In this chapter, we meet a powerful and enigmatic king named Dhul-Qarnayn. Now, that name literally translates to the two-horned one. And what's really interesting is that the Quran introduces him by saying people were already asking about him, which kind of tells you this wasn't a new story. This figure was already out there, part of the conversation. So here's the rundown. This two-horned king travels across the entire known world. I mean, from where the sun sets all the way to where it rises. He eventually comes across a community that is just being terrorized by these barbarous, almost monstrous tribes. So to help them out, he builds this colossal wall made of molten iron and brass, right between two mountains, and he traps the tribes behind it. And these tribes have names, Gog and Magog. But he leaves with a chilling warning. This wall is only going to last until the end of time. When that day comes, it will crumble, and all that chaos will be unleashed upon the world. Now, you've probably heard the names Gog and Magog before, right? They're not unique to the Quran at all. They actually show up first in the Hebrew Bible. But back then, Gog was a person and Magog was his land. Over time, though, in later Jewish and Christian traditions, the story evolved. They became two distinct tribes, and they turned into these powerful symbols for the ultimate world-ending battle that's supposed to happen right before the end times. So we've got a two-horned king and these apocalyptic monsters. But this is where the real detective work begins, because the key to unlocking this whole mystery might just be an ancient legend about one of the most famous figures in all of history. This is the question that has stumped scholars for centuries. Who was Dhul-Qarnayn? Was he a real person, a myth, or maybe something in between? Well, the clues start falling into place when you look at stories that were being told long before the Quran. Okay, check out this timeline. For centuries before the Quran even existed, there was this collection of myths and legends about Alexander the Great floating around, known as the Alexander Romance. Then, by the 6th century, a version of that story gets translated into Syriac, and, well, it contains some really shocking similarities. And I mean, when you put these two stories side by side, it's just stunning. It's almost uncanny. In the Syriac legend, the hero is explicitly Alexander the Great. He travels from the sun setting to its rising, he builds gates of iron and brass, he contains Gog and Magog, and the story ends with a prophecy that the gates will open at the end of time and they'll wreak havoc. It's practically a one-for-one match. But wait, there's more. Other historical clues seem to lock it in. First, other texts from that time actually described Alexander the Great as being horned. We even have physical evidence, like a 7th century bust from Cyprus, that plainly shows him with two horns. And here's the kicker. The evidence was so strong that the majority of classical Muslim scholars looked at all this and came to the same conclusion. Dhul-Qarnayn was Alexander the Great. So, there you have it. The stories line up, the clues match, even the early scholars agreed. Case closed, right? The two-horned king is Alexander the Great. Well, not so fast, because this is exactly where the story takes a sharp turn and explodes into a huge controversy. Because just when you think the puzzle is solved, you slam right into what's known as the pious king problem. It's this massive contradiction that just makes the whole thing fall apart for a lot of modern believers. Here is the big problem. The Quran describes Dhul-Qarnayn as a pious, righteous, God-fearing man. He's basically a monotheist, a role model for a good believer. But the historical Alexander the Great, he was a pagan. He came from a polytheistic Greek society, worshipped a whole pantheon of gods. He was, by definition, an idolater. And that question right there, that is the absolute core of the modern debate. How can a figure who is presented as a hero of monotheistic faith in the Quran be the exact same person as one of history's most famous pagans? It doesn't seem to fit, and this tension forces a total reexamination of the whole story. So this theological problem, it creates this cascade of other issues. especially when you try to read the story literally here in the 21st century. I mean, if Dhul-Qarnayn isn't Alexander, then the search for this king and his legendary wall is, well, it's back to square one. So for those who reject the Alexander connection and want to stick to a literal reading, three massive questions just pop up. First, okay, if he's not Alexander, then who is he? Second, and this is a big one, in an age where we have mapped the entire planet, where is this giant wall of iron and brass? And third, how in the world have these hordes of people survived trapped behind it for thousands of years? And this number right here, this is the key to the whole modern physical problem. 100%. We have detailed satellite imagery of the entire surface of the planet. A structure big enough to imprison whole tribes, built between two mountains. I mean, that's not exactly something you can hide in your backyard. This just becomes the unavoidable question you have to ask a literalist. The complete lack of physical evidence in a world where there are no blank spots left on the map, it poses a huge challenge to the idea that this is a literal, factual story. So you're faced with this theological mess on one hand, and zero physical evidence on the other. This has pushed some modern thinkers to come up with solutions. Solutions that try to make this ancient scripture fit with our modern world. And let's just say some of those solutions are unexpected. And here you can see that modern position laid out perfectly. Prominent figures like Sheikh Yasser Qadhi argue that the theological problem is just its deal breaker. They say because Alexander was a pagan, he simply cannot be the pious king from the Quran, no matter how many other parallels there are. For them, the description in the holy text has to trump any historical evidence. So if the wall can't be found, what's the explanation? Well, one of the most viral and frankly controversial modern theories is a pretty creative attempt to solve the satellite problem. The answer, proposed by some, is zombies. Yes, you heard me right, zombies. Okay, so the logic goes something like this. The reason we can't find Gog and Magog or their wall with our satellites is because they don't exist in their final, scary form yet. Right now, they're just dead corpses, so they can't be seen. But near the end of time, they will be reanimated as zombies to break free and fulfill the prophecy. It's basically a way of making them invisible to modern technology until the time is right. So, why did we just go down this whole rabbit hole about a horned king and a mythical wall? Because this story brilliantly illustrates the super complex challenges that pop up when ancient scripture meets the modern world. It puts the tension between historical analysis and literal faith on full display. And it shows the incredible, creative ways believers today try to grapple with fitting these ancient stories into our scientific age. And really, that leaves us with this final thought. When an ancient text seems to clash with historical facts or scientific discoveries, what's the thing that has to bend? Is it the story itself that needs to be reevaluated, or is it just our interpretation of that story that needs to evolve? That right there is the question at the very heart of this mystery.